Hi everyone, thank you for joining and taking time to tune into this live. My name is Protima and I'm the founder of True Bay India, organizing workshops and retreats in India since Jan 2019. Conversations Beyond Asanas is, as the name suggests, beyond asanas. It is the life of the teacher beyond the mat, to know who the person is beyond the teacher. My first guest in this multi-part series is certified Ashtanga Yoga teacher Laruga Glaser. There is never a shortage of time with the kind of questions that one can ask Laruga, and that is why we have split it into a multi-part series. And therefore, in the interest of time, and for those who have missed the previous episode, I will read out a synopsis of Laruga's bio. Laruga was born into a mixed racial family in South Carolina and grew up with her parents and younger sister in Edwardsville, Illinois. Since a young age, Laruga has been fascinated with mind-body connections and spiritual philosophy, which later attracted her to the practice of yoga in early 1996, after a sincere connection and study of yoga philosophy. It wasn't until she stumbled upon Ashtanga Yoga when she fully immersed herself into a devoted practice a few years later in 1998. She moved to Ohio Columbus for her education and graduated in 2001 from Ohio State University in human ecology with a focus in business and fashion merchandising. Laruga worked in the corporate world in the pharma industry in sales for a couple of years before she decided to leave her job and teach yoga full-time. She taught a Mysore-style yoga class in Ohio for a few months before traveling to India to learn the Mysore method of teaching in 2004. Since then, she has continued to draw inspiration from her daily visit to the mat, along with long-term studies with her teachers, late Sri K. Patabi Joyce, and now his grandson and lineage holder R. Sharat Joyce of Mysore, India, an advanced level practitioner and student of yoga, as well as a certified teacher of Sharat Yoga Center, Mysore, India. Laruga entered into teaching after many years of sustained practice and brings with her over 24 years total experience instructing body movement. In turn, she is dedicated to teaching the method of Ashtanga Yoga to its fullest capacity, cultivating transparency to the tradition and the deeply rich lineage the practice originates from. She met her partner, David Fredrickson, an amazing Ashtanga teacher in Mysore in 2009, and moved to Sweden from the United States to follow her heart and love. She has lived in Stockholm, Sweden for close to 10 years. Together, Laruga and David teach at Yoga Yama, Stockholm, where they run a daily Mysore program. Through it all, Laruga teaches as an act of deep sharing and love for what yoga develops in each individual, facilitating space to open, challenge, and inspire those to step into the center of their being and experience their inherent potential. Welcoming back Laruga to episode 2 of Conversations Beyond Asanas. So I'm just going to try and add Laruga in. Hi, everyone. Hi, Laruga.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Welcome back to the second episode.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
How are you?
I'm good. I'm really good. Actually, today it's been the weather's been really nice, but today it's been super rainy, so
Okay.
I'm like staying inside.
So I hope I got all of your facts right with respect to your bio. So before I ask your first question, I'd like to inform all the viewers that we will take questions at the end for the last 10 minutes. Just hang on to your questions till the end. So jumping right in, Laruga, As someone who quit the corporate world, I'm curious to know what was that moment when you decided to walk away from the corporate world?
Um, I felt, I think the first word that comes to mind is freedom. Just like, I mean, it was scary because it was, you don't have the security that's there of like a steady income. And the company that I was working for had really good benefits and bonuses and, their way of enticing you to like stay into that life. Because a lot of people that I worked with sometimes, behind closed doors, they would call it the golden handcuffs. It's like
Yeah.
they're made out of gold, but it's like you're kind of locked down. I just felt so free. I mean, I just felt like, oh my God, like this, it's scary, but at the same time, I just knew that I couldn't do it any longer.
Interesting. So it was just you quit cold turkey, or you thought and planned? How was it?
Okay, so actually, it was interesting. So the company that I worked for, they invested a lot of money into a new product. It was
Hmm.
actually an inhalant form of insulin,
Okay.
which was kind of, you know, helped some people, but didn't help so many other people. There was a lot of backlash from that particular product. I think some people had some adverse effects.
Hmm.
And because of this investment in this product, which they thought was going to be like a huge win for the company, they decided to cut, I think it was like 20% of the sales force or
Okay.
something like this. I think it was more than that, actually. I'm trying to remember the exact number. I don't remember exactly. And when I heard this, I was praying that it would be me. Like,
Okay.
it's like which is the opposite
Yeah.
because I just was thinking, I don't know, part of me is stubborn. Like once I do something, it's like it's hard for me to quit. Like I really feel like, okay, I need to follow something through or I need to have a plan. But then I was thinking, oh no, like I hope this is like the way for me to just really be out. And the thing that was interesting was that yeah, I was able to leave with a severance package, which was really nice. But they also offered like the severance packages, but also more money to like work with the consultant to for me to easily go into the same job in another company. So they
Understood.
actually offered that as well, like an easy way for me to continue to train and then to have someone work with me to just find another job in the same, which many people did. And I was just like, nope, exit, give me the severance. And I'm like, no, I'm kind of done with this work. And yeah, that was kind of how that unfolded, actually. So I guess I can't say I totally was like, oh, I'm done, I quit, but it was like a nice push. And it was so interesting as soon as that, because I was practicing, I was really a dedicated practitioner at the time. And I knew from that point forward, I knew I was gonna like go to India. I just knew like I was like, and I was already like the day of, I was already planning to go. So,
Which year was this? 2004?
um, it was going, all of that was going down around, yeah, it was going into the beginning of 2007, and then I
Oh,
ended up
okay.
going. Yeah, I went to
Okay.
Mysore just a few months after that. I had planned. Um, Yeah, I had planned it like right at the beginning. It was like right at the beginning of the year, all of this started to happen. And then I ended up going to Mysore in the first part of April.
Okay. But by then you had been practicing for close to 10 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
was super dedicated to the practice, even though I was, yeah, doing other forms of work. And I actually was teaching at that point. It was strange. I would work 5 days a week and then I would teach Saturday, Sunday. So
Right.
I was really like on this, yeah, I was like working every day, but it was just a love. It was just kind of like a calling to do that. So
How did you juggle both teaching
I,
and working in the corporate world?
I guess for me, the yoga and the sharing of the yoga was, I guess it didn't really feel like work at that point. It was like I just really loved the practice. It was such a it actually kind of saved me to do what I was doing, because sometimes it just wasn't my heart, you know, it wasn't like, and some people do that type of work and they love it and it's their calling, but it just wasn't for me. And um, when the weekends came, and actually it was just something that certain studios in the city I was living in Columbus, Ohio, they just kind of was like, would you be interested? They saw my dedication. It was like a natural, and
Hmm.
they, you know, they just asked me if I would be interested in working and or teaching, I should say. And
Hmm.
yeah, yeah, it was just like, it was like I was doing a class on a Saturday and a class on a Sunday.
Okay. Okay.
It wasn't like full, like, you
Oh,
know,
okay. So it's
yeah,
not like you were doing a teaching every day, and
yeah, yeah.
that was a good progression. So, tell me, through your journey into Ashtanga from the corporate world, what would you say to people who grapple their professional lives and Ashtanga? You know, how does it influence or impact one's professional life?
Um, I mean, I don't know if it does, if I don't think there's anything that's like go across, like running against the grain, I guess I should say. I think when I think about the work that I was doing, I mean, even prior to that, I was in other jobs with sales. There was a time that I was working um, for Abercrombie and Fitch, which their headquarters are in Columbus, Ohio. And I just feel like the yoga helped me to stay grounded in that type of work and that type of
Hmm.
environment. It was something that I really saw that I needed,
Hmm.
actually, to stay steady, to kind of open up my mind and see things differently, to
Hmm.
reduce stress, to have a
Hmm.
channel to reduce stress.
Hmm.
Um, and I see it with some students that I work with now. Like, it's not necessarily that they're unhappy with their work, but they really feel like how important that amount of time that they take in the morning. We also have some Mysore classes in the evening, but it's their sanctuary
Yeah.
to be able to go out and not only like do their work, but also to be a service of their families better, and just to feel like they've given to themselves and steadied themselves. So
So how, you know, there's a lot of focus on, you know, a lot of people set unreal standards with respect to asana practice, because they, you know, people
mhm.
who are in you know, juggling, you know, like you know, maybe kids, a job, householders,
Mm.
they feel that it's not enough because they're trying to emulate a yoga teacher. What would you
Yeah.
say to them?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because one common thing that I tell like yoga students or people who cross my path who are learning from me is that the benefits of yoga are immediate. It's unseen. It's that sense of calmness, that connecting to your breath, that groundedness, um, the the mind settling, and then I say the postures are on its own timeline. And the postures are just, it doesn't mean that we ignore them. Yeah, we want to be mindful in the postures. There's a development inside the poses, but it's really a landscape for us to just work through these obstacles and challenges. But when we, when, and whatever edge that we meet up against, it's just breathing there, being accepting and allowing. And that's where the real richness of the practice comes. And in many ways, when we look at the external form, sure, we can look at someone and be like, wow, that looks so challenging, or that looks beautiful, but we can't get caught up in just the external form only. We have to remember there's so much working inside. There's so much enrichment through the process of settling the mind and opening the heart. And I don't know why, but I keep using the word just being grounded. I think that's so important, that those benefits are priceless. And I always try to remind students of that, like how that's really where the real stuff is. That's really where the journey is inside. And if we can reconcile that and make that connection, it really changes the course of our life, um, in such beautiful ways. I mean, being able to jump back or jump through, it's not a bad thing to work towards, but it's really the journey we take inside to challenge ourselves and to work into possibility. And some, for some students, it's a long journey from standing to touch the floor, you know. Like we
Yeah,
always,
yeah,
people
yeah,
like to
for sure.
compare, but for some people that can be a huge, that's a huge leap to
Correct.
to find that release in the body. And it's just as worthwhile, you know. It's just about tapping into um, possibility, and to be open, and to be allowing, and to be accepting. So yeah, all
Um,
of those things.
so do you feel that yoga teachers are put to high standards that may be tough to follow? So are you guys actually all teetotalers and vegetarians and vegans? So I feel like, are you all really put to too high standards by students?
Well, the thing is yeah, I think there's a lot of illusion out there, you know, and I think sometimes some teachers can go wrong by putting out that air that they, you know, have it all together. But I think also sometimes students have a way of projecting that onto teachers too, with maybe not allowing them to just be human and to make mistakes. Um, you know, I feel like I'm very human. I feel like I have my faults and I have my drawbacks and all these things. And
Hmm.
I, I try not to have an air of like feeling like, oh, I have everything all together or whatnot. And, um, you know, even when it comes to diet, I mean, it seems very controversial now, but I can't claim to be vegetarian anymore. I had to change. Actually, this started in this year. Like 2020 has been a huge year for me, but it's like,
I think for all of us.
yeah, you know, and it's something that I will get backlash and people will judge me and things like that. But I was having major problems with my digestion. And it just, in theory, I wanted to eat a certain way, but my body was telling me no. And it's so interesting. Like I finally caved in and was like, no, I have to listen to what my body is telling me. Everybody's different. We have different ancestral makeup. And maybe I need to change for this stage, and maybe it'll change in another stage. I mean, I've learned now to be adaptable. Like how I ate as a teenager might be different to how I eat in my 20s to my 30s to my 40s. And just being flexible and understanding, like, because I really distinctly remember when I started to feel, this was quite a few years back, a slow decline
Hmm.
in my energy, a slow decline. There's certain markers that you can tell, like in your body, in your energy. And I didn't want to change. I didn't, like, at first, you know, you don't know what's happening. And then finally I had to make a few changes. Yeah. So right now I'm just not into the label or the identification of diet anymore. I'm kind of really over that, to be honest. Because sometimes people like to wear their diet as a badge of honor somehow. And the thing is I feel like there's so many issues that go with that. And with that being said, being in the Ashtanga yoga scene, the yoga scene, I've just seen so many eating disorders too, to be honest. So like it's disturbing. And
Yeah.
I could see myself slowly falling into that. And I'm just like, no way. Like it's another thing too, when you just try to fit into an ideal, and you will actually malnourish yourself to fit into that ideal. That is not healthy. That's not the path I feel that yoga should be taking us. So I know I went in a lot of directions with that answer, but
No, but I think it clears up, like, for a lot of people. I think there is this pressure because of the imagery that's put out on Instagram or social media, of and people, as you rightly said, are defined by their diets. They wear their diets on, like, as labels. And sometimes, as you rightly said, there are eating disorders aplenty in the yoga community.
mm.
um, do you feel being very fixed about a diet makes your mind inflexible?
If it's not working, yeah, and if it's making you not very pleasant as a person, yeah, yeah, I would say. I mean, I don't want to make these judgments, but I've been around it a little bit where, it can make you unpleasant. It's especially if you're being quite dogmatic about the diet. In theory, like I started being vegetarian in adolescence, against, like, my mom was freaked out when she was like, what the hell, like, because she came from a more of a third world existence where it was like, anything that you get is, you're thankful to have, and she's just like, great, I have this daughter here who's not gonna like, who's vegetarian. For her, that seemed like kind of strange. Like, it's like I was privileged enough to be, like, to say I'm vegetarian now, but that's when I first was very conscious of certain things, and I was reading stuff, um and in many ways, in theory, that's the diet that I want to have, but there were just too many things in my health that was declining, and in my digestion especially. Like, my digestion will tell me what works and what doesn't. And with that said, I mean, I still eat like certain vegetables and things like that, but it's just like, um, yeah, I had to finally listen to what my body was telling me. And I think that um, I've just observed it. I've observed this sense of the identification with food, and kind of the arrogance that comes with it too, and the judgment around it sometimes. And I can be, there was a time I was guilty of it myself, and I just feel like, and I don't like to say that there were times that I was privy to that. And this is where I'm growing as a person and understanding, that every person is different, and every body is also different. And we also, at our different ages, we need different things. So something I'll talk about more further. I think the diet thing is super interesting, and people ask me about it all the time. Like, what
Yeah,
do you?
I have just like a lot of like, I mean, I was going to ask you this question a little bit later, but I've had like too many questions on diet. Uh, so I'm just going to, that was actually going to be one of my latter questions. I wanted to ask you, what is the advice that you would give for diet? Because this topic of diet is just bandied around a lot,
Hmm.
and there's too much of judgment, as you rightly said, if one doesn't follow a particular label of what a yoga teacher or practitioner should follow.
Hmm.
So what is your approach? What is the best balanced approach that you would, what would you say?
That's okay. I'm just trying to, like, find like a good way to approach this, because I think the sourcing of your food is very important. So, um, I'm definitely all for whole foods, like whole foods. Like, if you're gonna get an apple, get a whole apple. Like, to me, I'd rather have an apple than something that's been processed with apple, or
Out
just,
of a bag or out of
yeah, yeah. Like, try to. I just think if you can't really go wrong with choosing whole foods as much as possible, um, organic as much as possible. Um, and I and also, if you look at the Ayurvedic approach, where they really recommend that you cook your own food, like
yeah.
cooking your own food fresh. I mean, I know sometimes we some of us live busy lifestyles, and it's not always so easy to cook, but now, like, now with the situation where many people are staying at home more, like, I know that, like, we've been cooking at home so much more. Even, but restaurants are open here, but we kind of got into the habit in the beginning, and then we've just kind of kept it where, we're not eating out as much, and it's actually been really, really nice to just come home and to be home and to be eating home. And even I'm
Oh,
like brewing my own coffee. I really got into
oh,
coffee, and like,
yeah.
I remember recently I got a coffee somewhere else, and I was like, "Oh, this is crap. Like, this is so bad." Like, I knew that I was doing something right when I, like, was preferring my own coffee versus, like, going to a coffee shop in town, which there's many of them in Stockholm. But Whole Foods, organic. I think what's so nice too, like here in Sweden, like a lot of things are like when even the eggs that we get, it's like from down the way. Like it's not too far from where we live, where they, and they're organic and they're pasture
Free
raised. And it's,
range, yeah.
yeah, like it's just like it's just with Sweden being a smaller country too, it's and also the standards for organic in Europe are a bit different than other places.
Correct.
So we're lucky in that way where when we do get certain products, it's like they come from really good sources and smaller batched farmers and things like that. So, but I don't know. I feel now so strongly that one diet doesn't fit all. I just, and that's something that I've just started to really, really realize in the last few years that it's the stage of your life that's important. It's your activity level that's important. Um, I went through so many years thinking that I didn't need much protein. Like that was like the propaganda I was always fed in vegetarianism. But my body type needs so much more protein. It doesn't matter the type of protein, it just needs more protein. Like where I was into this dogma. I don't know, like I don't know where it just like repeated, oh, you don't really need that much protein. You don't need that. That's a myth. But I thrive on it personally. So, but I couldn't claim that that would be good for you.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
like we all have to kind of try and we have to like to see what makes us feel good. And on top of that, we have to sleep properly. We need to get fresh air. We need to drink fresh water. And we need to move our body. I think, and then of course, take in the best possible source of food that we possibly can. So,
You mentioned about genetic makeup with respect to our diets. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
yeah, I mean, I think if you look at your ancestry, and sometimes there's theories about blood types too, but I don't know. I'm not so super educated on that. But like if you look at your ancestry and you look at certain parts of the world, certain foods are more tolerated with some people, in terms of your ancestry, and other
Right.
foods are not. So I think like sometimes people that go way back, like in like European descent, I think they are more tolerant of dairy, where other cultures are not as tolerant to dairy. It depends on, I think even some East Asian cultures, they're not as tolerant to dairy, and even certain types of like when it comes to certain carbohydrates or sugars too. Um, I know for myself, I've known this actually since my 20s, like certain grains and like wheat doesn't like it just isn't the best for me, but I would eat it anyway. But something started happening in the last few years where like my body was just rejecting it, through bloating, through feeling like kind of gassy and not, it just wasn't accepting it at all. Because I think, when you're young, your body can like assimilate things that it doesn't really want. But at a certain point, it's like, it says, I'm done with you. I'm like,
Yeah.
stop giving me this type of food.
Yeah.
So, um, from my perspective, I personally I tend to feel so much better on like a more protein rich diet, less carbohydrate. I don't know why. When I started to switch that way, I just felt so much better. I had less brain fog. I The bloating was the number one thing too. Like I used to like, I used to never get bloated, but that was just something that was like every meal and that's like a big indicator for me if something is working for me or not. And but it's something that people have to individually kind of research and take a look at all of that. And I'm diets are really fascinating for me because I've tried so many different diets in the past and cleanses and all these things. I've experimented with a lot of interesting
Mm.
things.
Mm.
So I just find it really interesting, and I just continue to try to have like an open mind around it all and not to be so yeah, not to be so dogmatic about
Dogmatic.
any of these things. Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to ask you, what has been your experience as a woman of color in the Ashtanga community?
Um, well, I think
Sorry,
I
I've just jumped.
well, I think I kind of explained that in my video, but yeah, like many times I'm the only one. Like I'm the only one in like there's been so many workshops, so many times, yeah, being in certain events where I'm the only one. I think too, like when you're a minority and you're like treading maybe treading into environments where maybe not a lot of minorities maybe they don't feel welcome or they're so attracted to, you get used to being the only one. You get used to being the one that is different. And but I feel like so many of those things, it's really difficult because it's like they tend to have a bias that they're not even aware of. I'm not trying to pit people out to be outright like mean, but it's kind of like um maybe they're conscious of it, maybe they're not, but it's like there's certain biases. And I think I mentioned this in my IGTV video where it was always like being put in my place. Like anytime I just kind of just stood up a little bit more strongly, it was always kind of like I always feel like this kind of pushing down. And it can be really frustrating at times when you're just trying to find your footing into something and you really truly love it. I mean, that's the reason why I've stayed in it and I've continued to just step forward even in uncomfortable situations because I love it that much. And there was something early on that really spoke to me so strongly. And I mean, there's so many stories I could have shared and I didn't, like of just I don't like I can kind of smile about it now, but there were just even from the beginning when I started teaching in Columbus, I was getting some weird behaviors from people who I thought were my teachers or people who had my back and how they really um I don't know what you would call that behavior. I remember one like when I remember teaching my very first workshop because I was and it was funny, like you're kind of given opportunity, but then it's kind of like when they see that it's maybe something that's resonating with others, it's like, oh, they gotta control that. Like I remember teaching my very first workshop and I didn't have high expectations because it was my first time. I was not a hugely experienced teacher at that time, but I was passionate about it and loved sharing what I knew. And I actually had a pretty decent sized group and it went really well. And like we just like and I was quite young then too, and we just as a group we were having fun and we were like working with tech. I think it was on vinyasas too. In Ashtanga we were working on vinyasas. And then every workshop that's done in this particular studio, they were everyone always does a feedback form. So every workshop that's done, there's people write the feedback on a form. And so I handed out the sheets and then they were collected by the front desk. And, I concluded the workshop. But the next time I came in, I went and asked about the forms because I wanted to read them. It was like my first time and I really wanted to,
You wanted feedback, yeah.
yeah, I wanted to see where can I improve or what did people like and what they appreciated. And I just remember they were like, oh, they're gone. They're disappeared. We don't have them. I was like, oh. That's strange. Can you ask the owners? It was a studio like that was part owned by three women. And and then check around. Oh no, they're gone. They've disappeared. I'm like, that's really weird. There were, because I had like over 30 people in this workshop. And it was like it's like things like this, like constant, like that. I mean, there's more I could share. I mean, I don't want this to be like, but it was
Yeah, I
just
know.
it's
Yeah.
things like this that were just so prevalent in experience in my work in doing what I'm doing. And to be honest with you, I was never one of these people that was wanting to hijack
Anyone's.
anything. I just wanted to
Yeah.
be a part. Do you know? Like,
Yeah.
and I always was one of these people that enjoyed collaborating too.
Yeah.
And then you notice, like, sometimes people, and I've seen this in the Ashtanga community, people have a really tough time collaborating and sharing space
Yes.
at times. I'm just calling it out as what I've seen. And like, I understand that Ashtanga attracts, it can attract go-getters. I mean, to do this practice long term, it's not people that like to lay back on the couch and be like,
Yeah.
okay, let life happen to me, you know, like it's it's going to be those go-getters, it's going to be possibly those more type A people.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we need to be mature enough and fearless enough to share space with other people, to be open-minded, to um, you know, to yeah, to collaborate because it makes everyone stronger and there's always something that we learn from different
Yeah.
perspectives and different
Yeah.
viewpoints.
Yeah.
So it's just something that I've seen and when I say this, it's because I want things to be better. I don't say it out of malice. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
it's the same thing like, you know, like when you it's a healthy criticism that, you know, because there's a caring there, it's something that to be aware of so we do improve, you know. So
Make things better for the future.
yeah. Yeah.
So, so that brings me to my next question: is what are the initiatives that you feel can be done to make it better for people in the yoga community, for it to be more diverse, and to make it a safe space for everybody?
That's such a great question. I think
I'm
it's
I'm just going to put on the comments again because,
okay.
yeah, I'm getting a lot of a DM saying I've put off the comments. So I'm going to, because, the comments were coming on your face. So I put them off. But sorry, I go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's such a great question. And I think it's something I'm still learning because on it from David and I's perspective, because also David's a white male and he's covered our Mysore program a lot of times when I'm traveling. And his attitude still attracted diverse people for some reason. We're a little bit like, what are we doing? Because a lot of because Stockholm, even though we're in Sweden, it's like there's a lot of diversity in Stockholm. And for some reason, we have gotten the feedback from students of different cultures, background, races that just said that they felt more comfortable with us for some reason. And we're trying to scratch our head on like, what are we doing exactly? I don't know. It's like an energy, it's a vibe, it's something that like that's just been cultivated in the room, but it's something that I'm trying to kind of like assess and get my mind wrapped around because we've just attracted that. I mean, we have, for some reason, we've attracted that and we've gotten the feedback from quite a few students in regards to this. And I think it's an awareness. I think, it's um, because in a way we haven't necessarily tried to advertise in a way that like oh like to create that type of energy because I think some people that are having trouble with it you do have to go into other communities and you need to be reaching out and looking that you are available and accepting and open um, but from our perspective we never had to advertise it. We were just it. It's an energy and it's a vibe that we kind of generate in the room. Maybe in one way because I'm foreign, but in another way, also David's he's also a very, even his friends say he's not very Swedish. Because he's not very introverted. I'm more introverted than David and I'm American, it's like, so it's like a mixture of like, I don't know, of something that we've cultivated and we really love. Like not only different cultures, races, um, like backgrounds, we like it's just also of energy and personality too. And it's like and the thing too that I've noticed is like I am not a preachy teacher. I really am in a place where I'm teaching and facilitating the practice. But if students want to talk to me one-on-one, again, in regards to diet, in regards to lifestyle, in regards to certain things with the philosophy. I mean, there's times I've done conferences and things like that, sharing all of those things, but we like to relay it through action and through how we teach. Um, in not such a, it's, we don't preach to our students, like, and there's also this really nice, healthy respect there too. At the end of the day, I always remember that all of my students are full-fledged adults, you know, that they're living their own lives and they're paying their own bills, and I do not talk to them as if they're children. I've been in environments like that where the teacher kind of comes in like a king, or, you know, or a queen or whatever. And that's not my vibe. I'm just really into, I want people to flower in their own space. And I really see that each individual has their gifts and has a way of blossoming. And I really want that to be, I want that space to be nurtured for each individual. I'm not trying to make people adopt a belief system, to adopt a certain energy, to adopt a certain diet. You know, like I've been in some ways, some places where it almost feels like there's a bit of a construct there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these are things that I want to continue to explore. And I don't think I have a really, I don't think I have a really strong answer for that, because we just, for some reason, we've been able to be a magnet for that somehow without even thinking about it.
So, uh, do you think that the fact that both of you come from a mixed racial background also aids in that, because it's diversity in that sense? So maybe it comes easier to you than
Yeah.
it would be to, say, a Western teacher.
Yeah, possibly. And maybe the exposure, you know, of people, because, you know, like David also, he lived in LA and he had friends of so many of different, you know, he had friends of different races and cultures, and was always very open-minded to all of that. I
Yeah.
think too, it's like the exposure that you have as well in your life, and it's actually a true interest,
Hmm.
you know, a true interest in different types of people, because I have a curiosity about people too, but David does as well, like just people
Yeah.
that are different. He has a true interest in them. I think that's really important, because when I spoke out and did my IGTV video, I got so many direct messages from people, and some people shared stories where it just felt like there was no interest in them, or actually an avoidance of them. Do you know, like where the teacher actually kind of wasn't giving, maybe even in the same as other students, because they were different, you know. And that's something, it was a common thing that I was reading, because many people shared their experience and how they themselves felt, which was really compelling, and it really opened my eyes to understanding how much of a problem it is in some places.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So that brings me to, the second part of the question, which was, how would you make, the practice spaces safe for everyone? Because there are, guidelines,
Mm.
uh, but it's obviously not physically possible for, for someone to go and inspect whether those guidelines are being followed. And
Yeah.
we've all spoken, and there's been a lot of conversation regarding abuse of power, sexual abuse in the in Mysore rooms. What do you feel that you know that can be done to make these spaces safe for practitioners?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is so important, because I think too, there always should be some type of guideline or some type of conversation or some type of um, written form where students really understand the protocol in the room. And I think one thing that's really important is that every student that walks into your space has agency over their own body, and they can actually say they don't want an adjustment. They can actually say, like, I always like that communication. Like, if, please tell me that you're injured. Please tell me if this is too much, if this is not right. I think students need to really understand that they can give the consent, you know, that of what feels appropriate to them or what feels right to them. And um, it's a hard thing for me to talk about. I mean, I've had people sub for me that who have crossed the line, and I just, it's nothing that I ever want to do. It doesn't even like, I always feel like on each person's mat, like they have their own, it's their space. And when I come in to give an adjustment, I really try to come in with respect, and I always try to step out with respect. And I always want students to feel a sense of dignity. Do you know, like, yeah, sometimes I have to like call out certain things, like, okay, we need to improve on this and like that. And it's always because I want them to be better. But we should never, we in no at no time should we lessen someone's dignity in the room. Like there's always that sense of like maintaining that respect and those healthy boundaries. A teacher should never encroach on any type of boundary that is not okay. It's not a place for dating. Like the thing is, this is not a place for you to have free range of dating students. I actually did, like, I feel I'm not, I have certain thoughts about that, but some people might think it's highly conservative, but I just feel like there's really no place for that. Um, I think all of these boundaries and understanding and having conversations with students and letting them know like that they can at any time state what is right and what is not and what feels comfortable to them and what doesn't. Um, I think it's so important that students understand that as well. Um, and when something doesn't feel right, you need to communicate that to the teacher. And if they don't listen or they continue to do what they do, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know who you can go to for this, but you need to leave and you need to report it somehow. Um,
So, what
it,
would be a reporting mechanism in your viewpoint?
well, it kind of well, there is an issue if the head teacher owns the studio. I guess that's a little bit difficult. Um,
Yeah, I mean, you would have just if they're not part of like say something like a pure yoga or something in in Singapore or Hong Kong, where there are multiple teachers in bankrolled there. If you have a teacher who is just running his or her own shala, then who do you go and complain to? And do you feel that students are then saying that, oh, I'll just deal with it because there's no one else to go to? Maybe that's the only teacher in that town or in that city. So you don't want to be ostracized from the community. And, so what would you say to students who feel that way and who are scared to speak up?
if it's, that, well, I think that's one of the things in life is that sometimes you do have to speak up, and it might be unpopular. And I think this is really difficult because there's been times in I remember, like, if I just share my own experience, I remember I was talking there was a teacher that subbed for me who his behavior was so outrageous and manipulative, and the way that he was dealing with female students, it was on a level where I was like, how did you even have the time or the energy to do this and teach? I didn't, it was something that it just kind of blew my mind. When I tried to talk to other colleagues and people who knew him, I was a little bit in shock of what I got back, like what feedback I got, because some people were like, "Oh, well, he's so charming though, and he's so funny." Like that's like seriously, it sounds like unbelievable, but the things that I got back was like there was no offer of support, no offer of um, I'm in this with you, or let me talk to him, or something like this. Um, that, but I'm happy that I spoke out against it. I'm happy that and the thing is that you will be viewed as a troublemaker for a while. But what happened later is that the behavior continued, not, at other places. So the reputation preceded him, or followed him. So, um, I wish there was a stronger thing that I could have done to take care of it, but I tried to notify people and let them know, or warn them if if they were interested in having him teach. But again, it's always going to be their choice. One thing that I did do is I was asked to do a certain conference. This was years ago, and he was going to be on the board or on the panel of this conference. And I told the organizer of the conference, I was like, take me off. I will not do it with this individual there. His behavior was so toxic with women. I will not be a part of it. And I told her I will not do it. And I was happy not to be there. And he could have sat on the panel, but she actually reversed it. She uninvited him and had me come.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's just like, yeah, you might have to be a troublemaker, but if you have proof, if you have the facts, I mean, you have to stand strong, unfortunately. And it's unfortunately, well, not unfortunately, but unfortunately, you might get pushback and people might not take you seriously at first. But I tend to believe that these behaviors continue if the person isn't self-aware. And because this person, he just seemed to think he had an excuse for everything, and wasn't self-accountable. But that behavior has a way of imploding at some point, unless they really make hard, fast changes.
So, we have only 8 minutes left before the live cuts off. So, I'm going to quickly jump into the questions
Okay.
on the live, so that there was a question on hormonal changes and how your practice and body changes. I'm just trying to find that. Yeah, so Laruga, please throw some light on how the hormonal balance affects the practice, and how can one incorporate the practice to deal with that, especially when women move towards menopause, a lot changes. This question is from Pooja Bhimra.
That's a really good question. But I don't know if I can answer it perfectly. I mean, I'm not going through menopause yet, so but it's kind of scary for me because I've heard some the thing that I hear from the practitioners that have crossed my path, who have taken classes from me with doing the practice, is that the end, like there's a sense of like a bit of fatigue and the energy dropping a little bit in the practice. Some women experience like a little bit of like weight gain during that time, and then it tends to level off, and then they kind of lose it again once they kind of get over that hump. I really feel like with any change, and it's the same thing like when women are going through pregnancy and obviously going through big changes with that, it's like just really honoring the change, being accepting of what's happening. Like because some days you might feel the energy drop and some days you might feel the energy rise, and just honor that. And you don't have to push against that resistance of like if there's fatigue happening. And just, I feel like with these changes, we have to learn to flow with it. We have to learn to flow with it as best we can. I think too that it's also going to be important to do research on what herbs or supplements you can take to support the menopause too, because again, that's a stage where other nutrients and lifestyle changes might need to be implemented at that time to make it at least happen more smoothly. Because if we don't make the right choices, then it's going to be much worse than it potentially needs to be. It's going to be a time to really take care of yourself, to allow that change to flow. as much as possible. And I mean, I remember I had last year at one of my retreats, I had a woman who was sharing with me about going through this experience. And she's just like, whatever happens, happens when I come to my mat. Like I'm gonna show up. It might be half primary, it might be intermediate, she just kind of gracefully stated like it is what it is. I'm gonna show up, but I'm just going to acquiesce in the way that I need to at this time. And I was like, that's great. I'm here to support you. So
Okay, so we'll take one last question. Um, you mentioned how you got to where you are now without taking shortcuts. You seem to emphasize that a few times. What shortcuts did you mean by I me?
well, okay, so for instance, like I found it was so important that I did the proper training and learning. I did not prematurely go into teaching. No, it was like I really took the time to grow in a nice, steady fashion. And I prioritized being a student first for a long time before teaching, um, and building up the skill set and building up the knowledge and building up the experience. It does not happen fast. Like it's really interesting now. Some people think they can just snap in a year, like 2 years. And I'm always a little bit like, okay, that's another approach. Um, I'm not saying that everyone's path has to be exactly like mine, but taking 14 trips to Mysore, practicing there, continuing to be a student. Like I've been around, like people they kind of think, oh, I hit a certain level. Oh, I don't need to practice with the teacher. I still feel like I needed to practice with the teacher at times. I mean, sure, the majority of the year I'm practicing on my own, but when I can, I'm very enthusiastic to be in that space, to learn, yeah, again, like I love that saying of you don't see the picture if you're in the frame. And I think everyone needs mentorship. Everyone, it doesn't matter what level you're at, everyone needs a little bit of feedback. So that's what I mean about the shortcuts. I mean, 14 trips to Mysore, continual reading, researching, studying, practicing. Number one, practicing. I know lots of teachers who will skimp the practice. That's not a priority so much anymore. I'm not saying it has to be push, 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 practicing, but that's the foundation is a lot, years of practice under your belt and understanding that it's something that progresses over time. And yeah, you're not going to be an expert doing a training and it's a one shot and then, you're an authority.
Yeah, the fact that you said about okay, we've got just 2 minutes left, so I'm gonna wind this up. So what we're gonna do is everybody who's asked questions, the next session, we will dedicate about half an hour to all of the questions, so that a lot more questions can be answered. I will also be reading out the questions that some of you have asked. Join us back next Wednesday at 6 p.m. India time, 2:30 Central European time with Laruga. And I really hope that you've enjoyed this session with Laruga. And I have found this extremely insightful. And I think that, I have another 500 questions, but we have only 1 minute and 16 seconds left. So I want to thank you, Laruga. Thank you so much for your insights and sharing so freely. And I look forward to chatting with you next week. And
Thank
also
you.
to all the viewers, thank you so much for joining.
The time goes by so fast. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
See you
Bye.
next time.
See you next week.